room to sit down.
Morning, welcome everybody to this meeting of the Planning Committee, 21st of September. I'd like to start off by congratulating Councillor Sims on his recent wedding at the weekend.
Thank you very much.
Hope this isn't your honeymoon. I'm assuming all full council won't be present at the honeymoon, but moving swiftly on then, declarations of interest. Councillor Nellams.
Thank you, Chairman. Part 5, P15052, as an employee of Trusco Estate. Thank you.
Any more? Councillor Bennett.
Item P15046 FUL as the owner of the buildings.
Thank you. Chairman of Council.
Yeah, I'll declare an interest. It's not an interest exactly, but as I have 106 property, I don't want to comment on the situation of somebody else's.
Which?
Item 8, sorry.
Item 8. Okay, thank you. Myself, I will declare an interest in agenda item 10 as the applicant. No more declarations of interest? Move on to the minutes of the previous meeting, 21st of July 2015. Councillor Billsborough.
I propose we accept the minutes of the meeting of the 21st of July, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Saville. All those in favour? It's unanimous, thank you. No urgent items, which takes us to part 1, agenda item 4, P15046.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for to convert an existing ancillary building. An existing ancillary building to a third unit of self-catering accommodation at South Hill on Briar. For the reasons set out in the report, the application is recommended for refusal. But I'd just like to update members of a late representation, which I've advised I would read out to members in addition to the late addendum report. So we've had an email in from a resident of Briar. This is to say on the 17th they held a public meeting on Briar with the Duchy. The format was very informal, but it enabled everyone to be able to meet Luke Humphreys and Adrian Smith and to raise any issues they wanted to, and it certainly worked very well. There were 19 households represented, 5 households sent their apologies and no response from 7 households. So a good representation of Briar. All 19 households represented supported the above application. Also, all 5 of the households who sent apologies supported this application. The overwhelming response is delight that another family want to come and live and invest in the island. It was also pointed out that they not only were losing 4 beds at Sampson Hill Cottage, we were also losing a 1-bedroom self-catering unit that is now going back to use as a family home. And I said I would report that because it came in late. They wanted to circulate that to members. If anyone wants me to read out the late addendum report, if you've not read it, I can do so.
Councillor Billsborough.
Right, Chairman. I've read this carefully. I am not convinced of the reason for refusal. That's what I'll say at this stage. I am not convinced. It's just an opinion, but it's not convincing to me. Well, in that case, if there's nobody else speaking...
Oh, Councillor Nellams is...
Sorry.
Councillor Nellams.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to support this application on the basis of the population on Briar, the new family wishing to come and live there, and I think anything that can be done to support new families coming to Briar should and could be done. So, and also there has been, over a long, long period of time, habitation, people living in that sort of cottage, call it what you like. So I think on that basis alone, just supporting it in the double sense.
We'll just point out that, if members decide to approve the application and go against the recommendation, I should stress that it's not necessarily due to a fault of the planning department. The planning department is asked to present the report based on the guidelines, and it's the choice of members to either adhere to those guidelines or not. But I just wanted to stress that. Councillor Saville?
Thank you, Chairman. This is a head and a heart case, isn't it? Quite frankly. And obviously, the planning officer's responsibility is to actually bring us a report referring to policy. And quite frankly, this does not actually fit with policy. On the other hand, it is quite an insignificant building and is actually well concealed. And as Councillor Nenham says, it has been used previously for habitation. So personally, I think it's a very difficult decision to make, especially having sat here the last planning meeting and made a decision pertaining to St Martin's that we refused. And to be honest, I would like to hear other members' point of view before I put my hand up either way.
Councillor Davis?
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I completely agree with Councillor Saville that this is a head and a heart. I quite understand the planning reasons put forward for refusing, but I think you know what I'm going to say. I think this is a situation where we must be ruled by our heart. We must support off-island habitation. I'm here representing the whole people of Scilly, and I think most people would wish to vote with their heart, and I would thoroughly recommend that this planning application is allowed to go forward.
Councillor Sims?
Well, I think this is why we have a planning committee, isn't it? You get grey areas. If it was all just done on technical reasons, you wouldn't need a planning committee. And I mean, I'd be inclined to pass it. And also, I would feel a little bit awkward just ignoring the opinions of quite a lot of people on Briar, because they've got to put up with this building, with good or ill. So I would be inclined to propose that we accept or refuse the recommendation, or you know what I mean. I would propose that we accept this application.
Okay. Councillor Bilsbury?
I presume it has been seconded. If not, I will second approval. I've always believed that in planning, you only reject something if there's good planning reasons for doing it. And in this case, I believe the case has not been made for rejecting it, and therefore I second approval.
I wouldn't necessarily agree with that interpretation, but I think, I acknowledge that you're seconding approval of the application. Councillor Peacock, did you want to speak? Or?
I was going to say yes, and I will support. Sorry. I will support the applicant's
Approval.
simply because I've lived on St Agnes for many years. And it seemed that anybody who wasn't a farmer wanted anything done, you couldn't get there. And I think newcomers coming in, it's very difficult. And and as the island supports it, I would support it.
Okay. Councillor Daly.
Thanks, Chairman. If it seems like they were going to approve this, is there any conditions that the planning officer would like to add?
Yeah, I would suggest we do need to have conditions with this application, but if members do approve it, they're happy to delegate those in conjunction with the Chair and Vice Chair.
Councillor Sims, would you be happy as that as part of the proposal for approval? And Councillor Bilsborough as the seconder for that, would you be happy with that?
Yes.
Councillor McCarthy.
Yes, without wishing to be too controversial, I mean, I think there are good planning grounds for turning this down. I think the planning officer's made a very good case. You know, this hasn't ever been a holiday accommodation, and it does seem a little bit as though we are being told, well, this sale won't actually go through unless a third holiday let is approved. And it is contrary to, as the planning officer says, contrary to the policies we now have it. But again, as our Chief Planning Officer was always fond of saying, there is, you know, this is finely balanced. There are clearly island issues on Briar that would like to see an exception made here, and it is an exception. We are going against our own policy, which is always potentially dangerous, because you let something very near the margin through, you're likely to let a large elephant through the same hole. That's awful similarly, but I think you know what I mean. So I, a bit like Councillor Saville, not very happy with this, but you know, I can see the reasons on both sides, but I think it's wrong to say or to imply that on planning grounds there isn't a very good reason for turning this down.
Yeah, and clearly, you know, that's what I've just said, and I think Councillor Saville said the same thing, and, you know, there's no reflection on a fault of the planning department. It's up to members to decide whether to use the plan as a guideline, and it's your wishes. I think, Councillor Moxon.
Yeah, the only thing I'd like to add to what Councillor McCarthy has said is go just one step slightly further, is that we note that if this is approved with the conditions that we've already stated, it does not create precedent for future applications.
Is that not always the case?
Every individual application.
I realise that, but I'd just like it noted.
No, I understand.
I've actually
concerns.
said that on this application as well.
Okay, I think everybody's had an opportunity to comment, so we've got to propose for the application to be approved, which has been seconded by Councillor Billsborough. So all those in favour of approval? Show clearly, please. You've got that. Against? Any abstentions? So that has been approved. Thank you very much. Somebody invite Councillor Bennett back into the room, please. So, one out, one in. Moving on to agenda item 5, P15052.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application to erect a new boat shed and construct a new slip at New Grimsby on Tresco. From the assessment set out in the report, the application is recommended for approval. We have had a late comment from Natural England, which has, we've put in a late addendum report out for you with the option to amend one of the conditions from requiring the full construction environmental management plan down to a condition that means they have to abide by the Environment Agency's pollution prevention guidelines. I can read that main addendum report out if you would wish, but it's recommended for approval with that amended condition.
The wishes? Councillor Bennett?
I think unless the requirements of the Environment Agency are stringent, then I would like to recommend the proposal. It's a vital service. The alternative has been to have the jet boats up on top of the quay, which in bad weather and with the flow of passengers on the quay is not desirable at all. I think this is sensible, acceptable, and I propose the recommendation.
Sorry, Councillor Bennett, is that the original recommendation on page 23 or the
amended
recommendation in the addendum?
I'm sorry, I was not aware of the amended one, unless it's just that.
Well, the addendum doesn't make any change to the recommendation. It's still recommended for approval. We're just suggesting we can change the recommendation to require a pre-commencement condition to submit a CEMP to a condition that says it should be carried out strictly in accordance with the pollution prevention guidelines.
Yes,
yeah.
with the amendment.
Councillor Saville.
Yes, Chairman, I will second that. This is an essential service. Tresco boats are now responsible for 3 islands, serving 3 of the off-islands, and maintenance is actually essential to each of these boats, so I fully support this.
Thank you. Any further comments? Okay, so it's been proposed and seconded. All those in favour? That's unanimously approved. Thank you. Item 6, P15057.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application to convert an existing guest house at Tolman House into 4 self-catering holiday let apartments. As you can see from the assessment set out, the report is recommended for approval. The application is recommended for approval. There is a late addendum report. When the committee report was originally drafted, we made a recommended condition about nominating managers' accommodation. On reflection, the addendum report seeks to address some concerns that we sort of realised that condition might have implications in terms of Tolman House already has managers' accommodation in Little Tolman. The condition sought to enable them to nominate alternative managers' accommodation. But if I just read out the addendum report, it might clarify it. So no further information has been submitted, but the applicants currently own Tolman Guest House as well as Little Tolman, which is a converted garage used for staff accommodation, which they currently live in, controlled by Section 106. The applicants have asked for about the possibility of allowing them to have flexibility in terms of which unit is used for staff purposes. They have indicated that they would like to let out Little Tolman and live in one of the proposed self-catering flats. Condition 4 was written to allow them to nominate which of the units of accommodation could be used for staff accommodation. But on reflection, it's a concern that if they nominate a flat within Tolman House, they would essentially have 2 units that were available for permanent occupation by staff. This wouldn't achieve their aim of being able to use Little Tolman for holiday let because it's a 106. They would have to apply to remove the 106 should they wish to let out it as holiday accommodation. The removal of the 106 would either create an open market dwelling contrary to Policy 3 or change the use of a further holiday let unit accommodation which would be contrary to Policy 4. The proposal to convert the guest house to 4 units of self-catering accommodation is currently acceptable due to there already being staff accommodation. Officers are therefore recommending that Condition 4 be deleted and amending Condition 5 to cover only 4 self-catering flats applied for. This is on the basis of the potential conflict in policy in that the use of Little Tolman as a permanent dwelling or holiday let would not meet either Policy 3 or Policy 4 of the local plan. If that's clear.
John.
So the new recommendation, the addendum, just basically tidies it up a little bit, really.
Sorry, is it actually saying that Little Tolman has to be the manager's accommodation?
That's already the case.
Yeah.
They already have Little Tolman as their staff accommodation, yeah. So the application they applied for was to convert Tolman House guest house into 4 separate units of holiday let accommodation, all self-catering flats.
But as managers, or as the owners of they're going to have to live in Little Tolman.
Yeah, they already do. Yeah.
The option of going into the house is being taken away.
Yes.
Councillor Bilsborough.
Chairman, in the addendum, which carries the latest recommendation in paragraph 5, it says, each property shall not be occupied by any persons for a total period exceeding 28 days in any calendar year. How do we check that? How do we know that if it isn't?
But they just have to comply with that. We don't. It is enforceable because they are required to submit details each year, or upon request usually, of who's been staying in each of the properties. That's a standard short-term holiday let condition.
I mean, it is, the Chairman of Council was just pointing out, is if you go to the final sentence, the owner of Tolman House business shall maintain a register of occupiers for each calendar year, including names, addresses and length of stay. So that, at least in theory, should take care of that issue. Councillor Saville?
Yes, Chairman, that's not a new...
No, I mean, that's the same, that's the
various.
same wording as for everything, but I mean, it does clearly stipulate there how we would approach.
Yes. Chairman, I'm a little bit confused. It says that conversion to 4 one-bedroom, 2-person self-catering units, and this will provide, then it goes on to say the self-catering units will provide 10 tourist bed spaces. Is that if they let out Little Tolman?
No, they already have a pre-existing self-catering suite within Tolman
thank you.
House. That's too bad.
Yes, yeah. Thank you.
Yes. Councillor Sims?
Regarding the haulings, I have seen it somewhere. There was some notion that they could be decorated by children or something, and I'm really, really uneasy about that. Not that they're not very good, however, I'm not particularly, I just think we should keep it plain, or possibly get Banksy to do it. Then we'd never get rid of them.
That's something to finance the project.
Okay, so any further comments or questions?
Can I just clarify, as a result of what Councillor Saville just said, we can amend condition 3 to make it a requirement to notify people in the vicinity, as well as which one condition?
Yeah, I think,
Yeah.
as Chairman and Council said, we should have that as a kind of fairly standard procedure anyway, I think, to create a minimal disruption to people in the immediate vicinity and the community at large. Give everybody a heads up. Okay, I believe it's been proposed and seconded. You happy with that? All those in favour? Another unanimous approval, thank you. Takes us to agenda item 8, P15062. Just give a minute for the chairman.
This is an application to replace an existing one-bedroomed, unrestricted dwelling with a larger three-bedroomed house. As you can see from the assessment set out in the report, the application is recommended for refusal. Amended plans were submitted, which haven't been included in the late addendum, but are on the PowerPoint presentation. The amended plans we felt were sufficient to address the second reason for refusal, which has been taken out. However, as the applicants maintain that the current dwelling is unrestricted and it is not reasonable to request a 106 to restrict the replacement dwelling, the applicants have identified a number of properties that where a section 106 was not required, and this has been addressed in the late addendum report. If anyone wants me to read that out, I can do.
Councillor McCarthy?
I'd like it to be read out, please.
Would you read that one out? Yeah. The applicants have raised concerns about the consistency of requiring replacement dwellings to be subject to Section 106 legal agreements, and have queried a number of properties with us. These have been, we've looked into the planning history, because obviously I'm not familiar with each and every one of them, but Chai-Khan on Hospital Lane was a replacement dwelling that was not significantly larger than the original dwelling, and the footprint in particular was on par with the original dwelling. No Section 106 was required. The post office on Briar, the approval of the replacement dwelling at the old post office predates the current local plan. The planning history shows that this was originally approved. We originally approved extensions to the original dwelling, but once it became apparent that the original building had fallen down and the applicants needed to rebuild it to implement their permission, they were advised to submit a retrospective application to rebuild the property. So this was a replacement dwelling in the end, larger than the original, but it was on the basis of approved extensions, so no Section 106 was required. Summertime at McFarlane's Down. This was a domestic extension only and predates the adoption of the current local plan. No Section 106 was required. High Pines at McFarlane's Down, this was not a replacement dwelling, this was a domestic extension. No Section 106 was required. Pedden Bros at McFarlane's Down was also a domestic extension where no Section 106 was required. Mount Flaggan at St Mary's, this was a replacement dwelling granted on appeal. No Section 106 was imposed because it was replaced a one-bedroom chalet with a one-bedroom dwelling after the applicant secured a lawful development certificate for its use as a permanent dwelling. Trefusis at McFarlansdown. This was submitted and approved as extensions and alterations to the existing dwelling, not a replacement dwelling. Again, no section 106 was required. Additional similar applications that officers would also like to highlight are the replacement dwelling at Watermill Lodge. Here, a new dwelling replaced a chalet with following a certificate of lawful use as a permanent dwelling. A section 106 was entered into. A further case was for a replacement dwelling where the small bedroom property at Spray View. This was permitted to be replaced with a larger but still two-bedroomed property without a section 106. This was on the basis of the original proposal, which was to demolish the large outbuildings and use the floor space to offset, to create a larger dwelling. However, as the outbuildings were considered to be historically significant to the former uses as an RAF site, the local planning authority required these to be retained and restored, but as a result, allowed the dwelling to be larger than the original on the grounds that the applicants were making significant investments in restoring the redundant outbuildings in the wider interests of maintaining a connection with the historic use of the site. So that didn't require a 106, but it was a replacement two-bedroom property.
Thank you. Councillor Billsborough.
Yes, Chairman, the applicant has gone to a lot of trouble to get the elevations right, and fair enough, that's great. What worries me is, though, this inference that if you enlarge a house, it is liable to come under a 106 agreement. Now, suppose you have a small house, you had a porch, you had a bedroom, you had two beds. Where do you decide, because there's no criteria written down, where you decide this justifies imposing a 106? That's my first question.
I think the policy is quite clear. If you build a new house, we would try and control that. And what's been applied for is a new house. We don't say in certain circumstances certain properties are exempt, like a domestic extension. We don't say that. It purely is on the grounds of a new dwelling.
Chairman,
I think the grey area, Councillor Billsborough, I appreciate what you're saying, but I think more to the point, the grey area with this is it's the interpretation of a new house, isn't it? I think in some people's minds, and maybe in the minds of people when the plan was originally drawn up, is a new house is an additional house where one didn't exist before, or replaces a shed or something, whereas when you're replacing an existing dwelling with no restrictions with another dwelling with no restrictions, potentially, that's where it becomes a question of semantics, possibly.
True, in all the years I've been on this council, when we say a new house, it's been built on a new plot. Now, what we're taking now is an existing house, albeit knocked down, on a established building plot. And
which is more a question of interpretation, which is what makes it very difficult, which is why we're all here to discuss and debate this on its merits and say...
I cannot see, Chairman, that it justifies imposing a 106, because the question again is it, if you extend a house, are we going to say then that we, at some stage we impose 106? We could argue this until the cows go home, but I am going to propose that we accept the application, because I feel if we turn this down, the applicant may well go to appeal and win the appeal, and I do not feel that it justifies imposing a 106, because it puts restraints on the site for the future which don't exist now. Therefore, I'm proposing we accept the application.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Billsborough. Councillor Mumford? Sorry.
I think it's a very grey area, and I'm completely muddled about it, whether this is a new build or a replacement build. I think we should remember that they're a young couple, and you know, it would relieve our own housing situation if they were to build their own house. But I'm still confused. What
achieves the best outcome for the community?
Yes, but I'm still confused whether this is a new build or a replacement build.
It's worth bearing in mind, if we were to support the recommendation for refusal, who benefits? Do we benefit as an authority? Does the community benefit at all? Nothing will change. We won't have another property with a 106 on it. It will remain as the existing dwelling with no restrictions. But as Councillor Mumford says, a local young family, you know. Just a comment, Councillor Sims? Oh, sorry, Councillor Hicks.
Yeah, I'd like to support Councillor Billsborough's proposal to accept it. And I think that imposing a 106 on it is unnecessary. It's you know, it's not fair to the applicants, and you know, it seems that there's other properties that are in breach of the 106 agreement. You know, and
that may be the case, Councillor Hicks, but we have to address those.
yeah, but you know, it seems
I understand what you're saying.
Where it's an existing building, it seems unreasonable to impose a 106.
I understand what you're saying, but the bigger picture that we as an authority need to look at then is addressing that issue through the plan, isn't it? Because ideally we shouldn't have grey areas.
Yeah.
You know? And again, I think this is another example, not the first one in today's meeting, where it's through no fault of the planning department or the planning officer to interpret the plan in the way that's been presented to us in the report. I personally have no issue with that. It's just that my personal view is that it could also be interpreted the other way, which is up to you to decide today, which obviously has been proposed and seconded, but I will take further comments for now. Councillor Sims?
Well, I definitely think it's a new build, but I said before, we have a planning committee because there are grey areas.
Yeah.
That's what we're here for. And also, if we were doing this in Bodmin or something, nobody would know the applicants, and I think it would probably be a little bit easier.
I don't think we have any authority in Bodmin, Councillor Sims, but...
well, okay, well, possibly, David. I just don't wish to comment on Bodmin Parish Council, apart from saying I don't know my Bodmin's there. However, what was I? I've lost my thread now. What I mean, essentially, we know the applicants. It's extraordinarily unlikely, in my view, that they're going to be here for a very, very long time. It's not going to go on the open market for a considerable period of time. So that sort of clouds the issue a little bit. But however, on a strictly technical level, I don't really think we should be allowing new buildings without a 106 if we can, because we have an issue over here with housing, and it's going to continue, hopefully, for a considerable period of time on the basis that people want to live here. And a lack of space. So I'm sort of tend to be minded to impose the 106 because I think that we actually should, in a general sense, but then again, I don't think the applicants are very likely to disappear to Bodmin in the near future.
And you started off by saying you don't think it's a new build, so again, another grey area. Councillor Molson.
Yeah, I feel somewhat uncomfortable about imposing a 106 on an open market residence virtually wherever it is. I do realise that there are grey areas within the planning recommendations. I think that the problem with the 106, it's a cudgel and a very heavy weapon that...
Well, I don't have any problem with asking if we can put a 106 on it, on any application. But then it's up to the applicant to say
yeah, but you understand
yes
what I'm
no,
coming from,
isn't
is
it?
the fact that it's not well defined within the current planning guidelines, and I think we do, as a consequence of, in particular, this application, need to revisit those guidelines with some sort of urgency so that we can define it.
Yeah, I agree. It's been proposed and seconded for approval. Councillor Bennett?
I support Councillor Billsborough. I think too, one thing that we do have to consider, you ask who is it good for? It's certainly good for the community, this.
Yeah.
With young people prepared to invest in the place and their future. Another small point to consider is that the 106 has serious implications for anybody seeking to borrow money or mortgage, and that can be a real dampener on the future of housing here.
Councillor Sims?
I would just say, in the light of what Marion just said, that I would probably reverse my position. I had forgotten about that, and it is an enormous issue. Trying to finance things with a 106, they just look at you and say, no.
Yeah. Councillor McCarthy or Councillor Saville? Nobody's got your light on, but I can see you both want to talk. Councillor
Chairman,
Saville?
The 106 is an awkward agreement. We all agree with that. But we cannot just keep building open market housing either. So, we're in between, the rock and the hard place, really, or whatever the saying is. So I just wanted to say that, following on from Councillor Mrs Bennett. I fully understand.
I absolutely agree, and I think again, I completely agree, but I think in this instance, for me, I can only speak for me, if it was an additional new build, I wouldn't hesitate in saying we need to impose the 106, but this isn't, and that's where we get back to the requirement for debate, which is what we've had. So if there are no further comments or questions, Councillor McCarthy.
Yes, all I was going to say was that the fact is, as the planning officer said, basically it's being knocked down and something 3 times as big is being put in its place. So it isn't actually an extension. The chief planning officer, as would always say that an extension has to be subservient to an existing building. And I think next door has a 106 agreement on it, does it not?
Yes. Chairman, can I just say...
There is a precedent for this. It is a very difficult situation because I'm aware of the family situation and one wouldn't want to put unnecessary obstacles in the way of things happening.
No, I think the one thing the debate has shown is, like Councillor Melson says, we need to address the bigger picture, but the general consensus around the table is that nobody is absolutely adamant that this is clear as night follows day, plain sailing, no questions asked. I mean, it's warranted a healthy debate, but I think I'm happy that we've had that and everybody's had their input. We have a proposer and a seconder. Councillor Billsborough, if there are no further comments, I will take the vote.
Chairman, sorry, all I was going to say, for the interest of clarity, and in terms of the application fee and the proposal, this is a new replacement dwelling. It's not necessarily an additional dwelling to the stock, but clearly this one is much larger. And also in the interest of clarity, members will recall that we have actually revised our Section 106 agreements so that they are much more modern. They do contain mortgagee in possession clauses, which is usually the main constraint for getting any kind of lending institutions to borrow against those sorts of properties. And I would say that 106s are a recognised mechanism in the Planning Act for actually restricting occupancy in this manner.
And can I just add also the occupancy restrictions that we impose are not designed to artificially lower the price of a property. They are designed to keep it they're not designed to make a 3-bedroom house only worth a lot less. They're just designed to make them a reasonable price, so they're not artificially inflated in terms of their value, which open market properties tend to be, whereas those which have occupancy restrictions, the intention is that the value is reasonable and reflects the size of the property that's for sale.
Councillor Mumford?
I think I think if you've got a 106 on your property, you're not going to get the same amount of money as you would without it. And I'm still confused about this. I still don't understand whether this is a new build or not.
This is a new build house. It will be taken down and rebuilt.
Councillor Billsborough.
Just supposing that the applicant had applied to have built a 1-bedroom building on that plot, would you have called it a new, justified imposing a 106?
No, I don't think we would.
My case rests, Chairman. My case rests, it's been based on size. I think we have to treat each application on its merit and give planning reasons for turning. I have yet to see a planning reason that would stand up in court for refusing it, and therefore I still maintain we should approve it.
I don't necessarily agree with that, but I think at the end of the day what we really come back to here is, much like many of the earlier applications now, is it's to achieve the desired outcome for the best benefit of the wider community, isn't it? Which is exactly what Councillor Bennett touched on briefly before, and I would agree with her comments on this one. And I would, unless, without ever wanting to stifle debate, I would happily like to move on with this one as soon as possible. So Councillor Sims, unless you're going to offer us some pearls of wisdom.
Well, what I was going to say is that we're all talking about 106s in a way like this. It's the big bad wolf, and I think they do impose a burden on people. However, the benefit to the wider community of 106s has been absolutely enormous, because I do not know what this place would be like
Exactly.
if we didn't have them. So that was a general theme, really.
We have a proposal for approval of the application without the 106, which has been seconded. As far as I'm aware, that's the only proposal on the table. So if there are no further comments or questions, I will take a vote on that. So this is all those in favour of approving the application without the 106. All those in favour? Are you in favour, Councillor McCarthy? All those in favour, show clearly, please. No. So this is approving the application without the 106. Okay. Against? Abstentions? Okay. I think we're going to need to show the against and the abstentions again, please. There was some grey area there.
One against.
Those against? Right. Okay, let's start this again, everybody. Ready? Decide what you want to do and then get ready with your hands, okay? Those in favour of the application without a 106. All those in favour of approving the application without a 106. We had 5 last time. Any advance on 5? Okay, any against?
6.
6. Any abstentions? 1. Okay, so that has been refused. 6 against, 5 in favour, and 1 abstention. Which takes us to agenda item 9, P15063, Wesleyan Building Supplies.
Chairman, do we not need another proposal?
I'm not sure because as far as I'm aware, the application is just for there not to be a 106 and you said there must be a 106, so that's not the application.
I would be minded to approve it with a 106. I just don't know how it works now.
Okay, but that's...
We haven't taken a proposal to refuse it then.
No, we ought to.
Do we need to?
Yeah.
Sorry?
I suppose we should. It'll be the same vote in the opposite direction, won't it?
Councillor Saville is right, Chairman. We must now take a vote on what's on here, refusal.
Yeah, I would agree.
You know, we turned down the approval, that still leaves it open, and Councillor Saville is dead right, as a former chairman, that we should.
Not quite dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a strange one because obviously it's not, it's voting on a recommendation that the applicant hasn't applied for, but yes, we can approve
with the 106.
with the 106.
Whether I can or not, I would propose that we accept the applicant subject to a 106. So I would propose that. I'll put it on the table, and whether we can go with it, I do not know.
Chairman, I think on a point of technicality, the difficulty is we can only negotiate on a 106 in terms of because it's actually a unilateral or bilateral undertaking. The difficulty is, I think, is there's a very specific recommendation, and that's one of refusal, because if the applicants aren't willing to enter into a section 106, which they've indicated very strongly they are not, we then have to refuse the application, which then gives them a right to appeal, or come in for another application with a 106.
There's no recommendation for approval, is there?
Well, I withdraw my proposal in that case.
So basically they need to reapply
Although, on a technicality, my view would be to make it very clear, actually vote on the recommendation, assuming it's actually proposed and seconded.
Chairman, I think
It was proposed by Councillor Sims and then withdrawn, but he may well...
But he said approval with the 106.
Yeah.
What we need to do, actually, is to have a proposal for refusal that makes it absolutely clear to the applicant. So, they can go to appeal if they wish to, or they can come in with an amended application. I propose that, Chairman, just for clarity.
Thank you.
I would second that.
Seconded by Councillor Sims. All those in favour of refusal? I mean, I'd have to say I'd be quite surprised if you're voting differently on refusal as opposed to approval, but you are entitled to do so.
Chairman, this is where the advantage of a recorded vote comes in. Then people not whether the roundabout, they say, and they don't know what they're right.
Yeah, I'm just checking to see whether or not the administration department are happy that they're clear on who's voted what way on the refusal, because it wasn't very clear to me.
I counted 8, Chairman.
I think it'd probably be a good idea in future to try not to have the recommendations on the basis you end up with a double negative, because it does get extraordinarily complicated to work out precisely what you're voting for sometimes, and what direction you're going in.
Well, I don't think it should, Councillor.
He's not having it. Let him go.
Yeah, it has this morning.
Yeah. It's very clear.
Can you just say it again then, please? Can you repeat?
Surely when we took the vote earlier, there was 5-4 and there were 6 against, so the against means that it's been refused, doesn't it?
Well, that was the way I viewed it, Councillor Hicks, but as Councillor Salmon pointed out, in order for clarification for the applicant and to make it easier for them to appeal, we've taken a vote for the recommendation for refusal. But I would have thought that the votes just would have been reversed. The same people that approved it. But then that obviously wasn't the case, Councillor Hicks, because we had a different number of votes. So you are entitled to vote. I cannot say anything other than that.
Can I just clarify? Sorry, the application was recommended for refusal. The applicants were asked if they were prepared to have a section 106. They said they were not. So the recommendation is to refuse. Members debated it, and there was a proposal to approve it subject to a 106, and you voted. That wasn't carried. My understanding is, I think some people voted for that, against that, because they thought there was going to be the option of approving it with a 106.
Respectfully, you made a mistake there. You just said we had a debate and took a vote of approval subject to a 106, which is not what we did.
Did you not?
No, it was without.
Sorry, without a 106, sorry.
Again,
you took a debate and there was a proposal to approve it without a 106, which failed. So we're left with a situation in that the recommendation is to refuse, but there's no other recommendation that you voted on.
And we did.
Yeah.
And
We have just voted
Yes.
there's no
To
point
refuse it. Yes.
There's no point us voting through an
Sorry,
application with a
that's
106 if they
it.
don't want it anyway. So, yeah.
The choice is now theirs.
Yes.
Oh, well, I did attempt to move on some time ago. I'm sure this is the second time I've said agenda item 9, P15063, Wesleyan Building Supplies.
This is an application to extend the existing mixed-use building at Porthmelon Industrial Estate, which includes increase in roof height, an extension on the front and a porch and some cladding. The application is recommended for approval subject to conditions for the reasons set out in the report.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions?
Well, I would propose it, and I know what he wants to do. He hasn't got enough storage place, and it causes bottlenecks with building materials here. So I'd like to propose we accept this application.
And I would second that, Chairman.
Any further comments or questions?
I would like to second
Councillor Sims's. Yeah, so it's been proposed and seconded for approval. No further comments and questions. All those in favour? That was easy, wasn't it? That's been approved. Agenda item 10. Thank you very much. I'll pass over to the Chair of Council.
Thank you. Agenda item 10, I'll hand over to the Senior Officer.
Okay, this is an application for the erection of a domestic shed within the garden of Autumnal Lodge. Permission is required due to the removal of permitted development rights when permission was granted for the replacement dwelling. As you can see from the report, the application is considered to be acceptable and is recommended for approval.
Thank you. May I know your thoughts on this one, please? Councillor Mrs. Saville.
I propose recommendations with the conditions, Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any further thoughts? Councillor Mawson.
I'll second that.
Thank you very much. Councillor McCarthy, no? Nobody else? Does anybody else wish to say anything on this application? No. In that case, it's been proposed and seconded. Those in favour, please show. That looks unanimous to me. Thank you. There's nobody against. No. Thank you very much. That's carried. If somebody could call the chairman of the committee back in, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Which takes us to part 2, reports for information only. Agenda item 11, schedule of delegated planning decisions. Report of the Senior Officer. Would you like to comment on it at all, or any questions? I appreciate it is for information only, but we do try to offer people opportunity. Councillor Mumford.
Yes, could I make a comment, please, about 2.8, which is a lawful development certificate for the erection. I think actually the building is there. I don't think it's for an erection.
Yeah.
This property was built 15 years ago and has escaped the 106. And there's a lot of ill feeling around. I should say that I do have 2 stepdaughters that live up there, but there are other people that are complaining up there. And this was a mistake by the planning officer 15 years ago. All the other houses up there, they weren't allowed to dig their foundations until they'd signed a 106. Now, how did this one escape? Is there any way that the council can undo a wrongdoing by asking them or enforcing them to put a 106 on this?
Chairman, in brief, technically, in essence, the decision notice should never have been issued until the Section 106 had actually been signed. And so technically, the enforcement should have been right at the very beginning of the process 15 years ago. Now, in case law, if a building has been erected and has been occupied for a period of more than 4 years, there is absolutely nothing we can do in terms of planning law. And unfortunately, the matter is really out of our control.
Well, what a shame, because I think there's going to be a lot of ill feeling. It puts the price of that property up considerably against any of the others that want to sell. And, you know, it could go on the open market. And I would just like this recorded, that I'm, you know, quite upset about this, that there should be a 106 on this property, and it should never have been allowed in the first place.
Chairman of Council.
Yeah, I can't help but agree with many of the comments that Councillor Mrs Mumford has just made. This has been a thorn in our sides for many, many years now. we do need to level the playing field. We do need a standard approach to getting documents signed, and I think there are valuable lessons that have been taken away from this. It should not have happened. Unfortunately, to quote Councillor Mrs Saville, we are where we are in terms of planning law, but it's highly regrettable.
Are there no further comments or questions?
Sorry, could I just ask about 2.1 for clarification of what decision withdrawn means? I don't know who can help me with that. It's on page 171.
Did you say 2.1?
2.1, yes.
Well, which one am I looking at? Oh yeah, there was an application made to vary a section to amend a section 106 on Cayenne Moor to the current modified section 106 agreement. It was on an old version because the applicants were selling it, but because the sale went through, they withdrew their application to vary their 106.
Right, okay. I think I understand. Thank you.